Welcome to live photo editing. Today I'm going to go through two bird photos that I got recently and kind of just show you my workflow and how I would edit these pictures and give you some tips along the way. So hopefully you can get better at editing your own photos. Let's go ahead and get into Lightroom and take a look at these pictures. So the first one is this neotropic cormorant. The framing isn't exactly the best on this picture, so we're gonna have to do some cropping to try and see if we can make it work. And we've also got this orange-crowned warbler, which I like quite a bit. So let's go ahead and work on the cormorant first. So whenever I am editing pictures, one of the first things that I like to do is crop. So everybody has like the first thing that they do. So like some people go down here, lens corrections and remove chromatic aberrations. I like to crop first just so I know what I'm doing. I'm not against removing chromatic aberrations right away. It all kind of needs to get done right away. So the order doesn't exactly matter. So we've got the chromatic aberrations removed. Now let's go ahead and crop so that we know what we're working with here. So I think because the bird is kind of up and down, we're going to go with more of a vertical image. So typically if the bird is more horizontal, like for this orange crown warbler here, um, like that, that's a horizontal picture. I don't feel like that would look great vertical. You could probably make a pretty good case that it would look good vertical. I like to try just a mix of things and see. For this one, I think it's going to look best vertical. So let's go ahead and crop quite a bit and just kind of see how this looks. Do that. That's a pretty tight crop, but I feel like that fits this bird quite a bit. When you're cropping, you want to make sure that you don't leave anything too close to the edge, like this right here. That might be just a little bit too close to the edge. I'm gonna bring it up just a little bit. What we want to avoid is a lot of dead space up here that just doesn't do anything to the picture. Um, I would like to maybe zoom in just a little bit. I think if I could retake this picture, I would maybe move down just a little bit. I think when I was taking this picture, there was something down here that I didn't like, so I was trying to get rid of that. I mean, of course, with wildlife photography, especially, you just don't always get what you would like, but we always try to make the best with what we have. So, I feel like that's a pretty good crop. Typically, I like to leave more room where the bird is looking because if I were to crop maybe like really tight like that, that just won't look good because there's more space over here where the bird isn't looking than over here, and it just feels like it was cut off a little bit too early. So you want to make sure that you're leaving a lot of space to where the bird is looking. I would rather, if I had to, cut off part of the bird than have this part right here cut off. So I think that's honestly a pretty good crop right there. Although I do want to make sure that I've got a little bit of space right there, just so it doesn't feel cut off. So I think that's a pretty good crop. So once we've got that, there's several things I like to do next. Sometimes I just like to go in here and just start messing with the exposure, getting that right. One thing you want to make sure is you want to make sure that your screen display is at about medium brightness. So like if I had it turned down all the way, it would look like my picture is underexposed, which it's not actually. So typically you want to have your brightness turned at about medium, provided that you're in a room that doesn't have a lot of glare. So now we make sure that our brightness is good. There are several things we could do. If there was distractions, I would probably want to remove those right now. This picture really doesn't have any, so I think we're pretty good there. Yeah, there's not a whole lot to be worried about because I kind of like this texture in the water here. So we'll go ahead and keep that. Um, so we could just start messing with the exposure. I think we'll go ahead and do that. I always like to hit auto and just see what Lightroom thinks is best. I don't always agree with it, but generally it's pretty good. So we'll go and turn down the highlights some, and I think it brought the whites up just a little bit too much. I don't want my background to be too bright, because then you're gonna just start losing focus on the bird. The bird's going to look a little bit less sharp just because your background's gonna be brighter. So like if we were to bring the highlights up, you start losing that detail. So I want to make sure that I've got all the detail that I can. Somewhere around there is probably good. See what happens if we do these whites differently. Just like to kind of play around and experiment and see what looks best. If we darken that, we start losing some detail on the feathers. In this phase, I'm not necessarily trying to have it look good. I'm just trying to bring as much detail out as possible. So I'm just kind of experimenting with what gives me the most detail. We'll add contrast and stuff in later. think that looks pretty good. If we look at our histogram, we're not losing anything on the darks or anything on the highlights, so I think we're good there. And I feel like you can really see all of the feather detail. There's maybe a little bit that you can't quite see right there, so we could experiment with bringing that shadows up some. I don't feel like we really have to though. I kind of like how it looks right now. So after I do that, one of the next things that I'm going to do is add just a little bit of texture. So I'll add anywhere from like 10 to 15 with the texture, and I usually take away just a little bit of clarity. Um, Kind of just makes it just a little bit better, kind of emphasizes those small details and then takes away some of the bigger details. Vibrance and saturation was set automatically. I really don't do a whole lot here. It's typically always plus 15 or somewhere around there. There isn't a whole lot of color with this picture. There's some, but it doesn't look weird right now. So I think that's fine. If I was taking a picture of a bird up against, I might bump that saturation down just a bit because I don't like to have a very saturated sky. So after we've got this done, there's several things we could do. We could add some contrast with the tone curve. Um, Color grading and color mixing, I really don't do a lot of that with wildlife photos, just because with landscape photography, I might do a lot more of that because there's colors with leaves and stuff. So with colors a lot more if I'm doing landscape photography. But with wildlife photography, I want to keep the colors as natural as possible, especially with birds. And in this case, there really isn't a whole lot of colors to change. So we'll probably just go ahead and skip those. Hey, we'll go and experiment just a little bit with color grading because I like to warm up the picture sometimes or cool it off just depending on how it looks. So we'll just go ahead and experiment. Really don't like warming it up a whole lot. Um, Adding a little bit of pink tint. I don't know. I don't think that really adds anything to the picture. The question that I'm always asking myself is, does this add anything to the picture and does it make it better? In this case, I don't think mixing the color or doing anything like that really does. So this picture does have some noise. It was taken at ISO 6400, which the Z6 III, which is the camera that I took this picture with, does a pretty good job. You can see that there is some noise if we really zoom in. But right here, there really isn't a lot of noticeable noise. I think that would, if you zoom in some, of course you can see some. But I think overall it's really pretty good. We'll go ahead and do denoise just because the denoise I feel like does a really good job. Um, And so there's really no reason to not do it. It doesn't significantly take down the sharpness of the picture. Sometimes I feel like it actually adds some sharpness. Um, yeah, I like doing it for most of my pictures. Of course, if there's very little noise, I probably won't do it. But yeah, the denoise is really good. It keeps a lot of details. Sometimes I'll do some manual noise reduction, just depending on the situation, but I really like Lightroom's denoise. So let's go ahead and zoom in quite a bit and just see what all that did. So if we uncheck it, that's the previous. That's what we have now. Really brought out a little bit of extra detail, I feel like, in the bird and got rid of all of that noise, which this is a very, very clean and sharp picture. Um, yeah, I really like just how sharp it is. Speaking of sharp, let's go and add a little bit. I typically do about 50 for my sharpening, then amount 75. This picture really doesn't need a whole lot. Let's go ahead and sharpen some of the major features. Yeah, it's a very sharp picture, so that really doesn't need a whole lot of sharpening. As far as manual noise reduction, isn't really anything here. The denoise does a great job, so I don't have to really do that. Already done our lens corrections right away, and then it automatically does the profile corrections for me. We can do upright transform. There isn't any, which there isn't for a lot of my bird photos. Sometimes there is, so I always check it just to see what Lightroom thinks would be best. But generally, it doesn't need any. Lens blur, I don't really like this. It just adds in some artificial lens blur. I'll go ahead and show you. Um, it can be helpful. I just feel like it kind of takes away some of your control and doesn't always do a great job. That doesn't look bad. Takes out some of that detail back there, which I kind of like that detail. So we might go and take that down a little bit. kind of draws some focus to the bird. One thing that I really don't like about it is typically when you look at the edges, it kind of takes away part of the edge because it's blurring it. So I don't really like that about lens blur, but sometimes it can be helpful. We're going to leave it unchecked for now. Effects is your vignette, some grain if you wanted to. I do not want to. A vignette is always nice. I like to put it on a lot of my pictures, but right now I do not want to do it. I like to do it in masking where I can have a little bit more customization over it. Calibration is your colors if you want to change the tint a little bit. I don't really know what I like. That's with none. That adds a little bit of pink. So we'll keep it at that. See if that adds anything. Doesn't do a whole lot, but it kind of takes out some of that green, which I like. Um, really isn't going to be a whole lot of color here. Gonna move this up just to see what it does. Adds a little bit of extra saturation. I think I like that. So the one thing that we haven't done inside of here is the tone curve. So we'll go and do that a little bit, and then we'll get to masking, which is probably my favorite part. I really like masking. We won't do much here. Just do a little bit of a tone curve. Add some contrast to the picture. Toggle that on and off. I think that really makes the picture pop, gives it a little bit of extra contrast, which is always nice. Another way that I like to add contrast is with masking. I like to darken certain areas and lighten some areas. That's another way that I like to add contrast. So inside of masking, one of the first things that I do is work on the bird's eye. You want to make the eye the focal point of the picture. That's generally what our eyes are drawn to right away. So I always brighten it just a little bit with the exposure and then add some clarity. Just add some contrast to it, which is nice. Let's go and zoom in and then toggle this on and off. So you just kind of brighten it a little bit. So next, this picture is looking very good, I think. There's several things we could do. We could try to bring out some details in the bird, like right here and right here. You can't see all of the feather detail. We could brighten up the face some, just so your eye is drawn to that. Your eye is always going to be drawn to the brightest parts of the picture. Or we could add a custom vignette. But right now, let's go ahead and work on the bird. So we'll go and zoom in some here. Just kind of brush around right here. See what would happen if we brighten this up some. You can see that adds just a little bit of detail back to the feathers that we can see. So I think I like that. This, we might not do a whole lot here, just because you need to have some dark areas of your picture. Otherwise, you don't have any contrast, which then is going to make your picture look a little bit less sharp. Let's see. I don't know that I like that. That's not too bad. Warm it up just a little bit. And I've actually got some of that background in there, which I do not want. So we'll go ahead and have us subtract the background and get rid of that. I think that honestly adds a little bit to the picture. It doesn't take away too much contrast, and you get to see just a little bit more details. One thing that I don't like is it brightened up like this one feather right here that's kind of sticking out. Brighten that up just a little extra than I would really want it to. We might darken that just a bit. So I think that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and add a little bit of contrast to the bird. The way we're going to do that is apply a mask right here to the back and darken that a bit. So our sunlight is coming from the left, like right about here, and then shining this way. So this bird is actually technically a little bit backlit, but you can see that there's more light right here. So we want to kind of accent that. What I really wouldn't want to do is artificially make the sun look like it's coming from the right. That just always looks bad, in my opinion. and it's really hard to do correctly so that it doesn't look crazy. So we didn't do a whole lot there, just add a little bit of contrast to the back, kind of made these highlights stick out some more. Another thing we can do is add a custom vignette, which I like doing. See if I can move this out of the way. So I just always get a big brush. You can also do this with the radial gradient and then kind of paint around here. I always like to add just a little bit more space to where the bird's looking. And then what we're going to do is invert it and darken it down. Let's see how that looks. Just kind of draws you into the bird a little bit. We might add just a little bit over here so it doesn't get caught with the face at all. Subtract. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. Move that in. Now I just kind of want to zoom out and see if there's anything that I can do to improve this picture or anything that is kind of distracting. I want to remove that. Really, there isn't a whole lot here. This texture right here, I feel like is a nice little element. One thing that I don't like is there's a little bit of texture right there. I feel like it might look better if it was clean. This really is not a big deal, but we'll just go ahead and remove it just to see if it looks better. If it doesn't, it's easy to get rid of. I don't know. I think that might add something. I think that makes it look just a little bit cleaner and kind of, for me, I feel like I was getting distracted by that. That was kind of taken away from the picture. So we'll go ahead and do that. Leave it there. Yeah, I don't think that's not a big deal at all. Like, it doesn't add a whole lot, doesn't take away a whole lot. But I think just little things like that can help improve your pictures. So overall, I really like how this picture turned out. Yeah, I don't think there would be a whole lot more that I would add. I like to kind of keep my pictures not overly edited. If there's something I can fix with the camera, I want to fix it in the camera and not in Lightroom. So I don't do a whole lot when I'm editing my pictures. Let's go ahead and move on to the orange-crowned warbler to see what we can do here. So this is not as big of a crop as the cormorant. Might do something like 4x5. We could try a vertical picture because the bird is kind of looking down. Let's see what that would look like. That's not bad. Sometimes when I can't decide if I want to do vertical or horizontal, just do a square. See how that looks. Honestly, not too bad because we've got several different things that kind of are influencing how I want to crop this. First, we've got this stick that's going horizontal. Then we've got the bird that's kind of going vertical a little bit. So when you've got these two different things, typically that's when a square is the best way to go. Trying to move that just a little bit to give my bird a little bit more space down here. I think I like how that looks. One thing that I want to avoid is getting this stick too close to the edge. It wouldn't be bad if I just make it a little bit bigger. The bird's not going to get lost. It's not that small. So there's several things that I don't like about this picture. Number one, we've got this seed thing right here that's in the way. It's out of focus and it's just a distraction. Can't really remove it though because the stick goes right there. So just kind of got to live with that. And then we've got this little stick right here. So let's go ahead and remove that right away. Very easy to remove. We could use the clone tool or just have Lightroom remove it with AI. Makes it nice and quick and generally does a pretty good job. I don't know why I did black. So let's go and clone. Yeah. Got rid of that. There's a little bit right there that we can maybe get rid of. I don't think that's too distracting though. I think that's fine. So we've got our crop. We've removed a distraction. I think we're ready to start editing. So let's go ahead and just do auto, see what Lightroom thinks would be best. And honestly, even if you didn't learn anything in Lightroom, all you did was auto, your pictures are going to look better. That's what we started with. That's with auto. Just when you shoot raw, it's purposefully going to make them a little bit duller. So just hitting auto really enhances those colors a little bit. And you don't have to learn anything. All you gotta do is press that button. If you do learn Lightroom and know how to customize stuff, you're going to get better pictures. So one thing that kind of stands out to me is I feel like it's a little bit overexposed, just a little bit, just really the highlights. Shadows are good. Let's bring these highlights down just a little bit and bring these whites down some. I feel like that's good. We might, this is just a little bright, I feel like, because it's against the sky. So we might darken that just a little bit, darken the background some. Overall, though, I feel like the exposure is pretty good. Bring up our texture some and bring down our clarity. And then saturation and stuff looks pretty good. Lens corrections, remove that chromatic aberration. Not that there really is a whole lot in this one. See if we got any upright transformation. Nope. ISO 160, so very little noise, I don't think. Every part of this picture is really bright. I don't think we really have any reason to remove noise. And anytime that you don't remove noise, you are getting a sharper picture just because noise reduction does get rid of just a little bit of sharpness. Now, Lightroom's denoise is very good at maintaining sharpness, but you do still usually get rid of a little bit. Color grading, I don't think I'll really do any this time. Yeah. I don't feel like there's a whole lot to do there. If we go down here to calibration, though, or maybe desaturate the green just a little bit, see how that looks. I feel like the bird is unusually yellow. Gonna desaturate just a little bit, make it look a little bit more natural. Yeah, I like how that looks. Mess with the tint a little bit, see if that adds anything. I don't think it really does. I'll try just a little bit of green. See what that does. That's not too bad. All right, lens blur. Like I said earlier, I don't really like it, so I can't imagine we'll do it. It's probably gonna mess up that stick right there. It did a pretty good job. Didn't do a whole lot, but so that's without lens blur. That's with. I don't know. I really see much of a difference to do it. Maybe it adds a little bit. So we'll try it for this one. I don't do it on a lot of my pictures just because I don't like it and it's fake. I feel like, but yeah, it adds a little bit in this picture, so we'll keep it. So that was pretty quick to get through all this stuff right here. So now we're on to masking. Several things we could do. Got to add a vignette to just draw your focus on the bird, and we need to work on the bird's eye. So let's go ahead and zoom in on the eye. Always bring my feather down for the eye. I don't want any feather on there. Bring up the exposure a bit and bring up clarity. Turn that off. That's what it looks like. That's without, and that's with. Definitely adds just a little bit and draws your attention to the eye, which is what we want in all of our bird pictures. Next, let's just go ahead and add the vignette, just get out of the way. It's not really going to affect a whole lot when we're editing other parts of the picture. And I like to do a brush, but it's just as easy to do a radial gradient. Especially in this picture, I don't need a whole lot of customization. Radial gradient would have been fine. You can see what I made right there. That's essentially a radial gradient. Overall, I really like how the light is and everything in here. We might brighten the face just a little bit. Actually, right here, it's kind of in the shadows. We might lose some contrast with our picture if we brighten this, but we also might gain just a little bit of detail. I think that looks great. I'm going to turn that off. Yeah, add just a little bit of detail. What it is doing is it's still in our background. So all I'm doing is going up to subtract and then select background. gets rid of the little bit of background that was right there, because I don't want it to brighten up the background at all. I mentioned it earlier, we might darken down this just a little bit. I don't care if I brush over the bird, because I'm going to subtract and then select subject. That's going to get rid of all that. I also wanted to get rid of that little thing right there because I do not need that to be any darker. Or if I do darken it, I want to have control over that. So let's go and select objects and have it subtract that. Now, you can see it's missing just a little bit right here. This isn't exactly the area that I wanted to get rid of, but it might look weird if we don't do it. So let's go ahead and just brush it real quick. I don't think this is going to matter a whole lot. We'll see how it looks. Zoom out, darken it just a little bit. See how that looks if we turn it off. I think that adds a little bit, just kind of draws your attention to the bird. I feel like before it was a little bit distracting, and we want to get rid of all the distractions that we can. Another way that we could have done it, and we might still do this, is a linear gradient. Apply it over here, and then subtract the subject and darken that way. I think the combination of those two actually looks really good. Another way that we could have done it is we could have done a luminance range. I feel like with that, it's kind of, there can sometimes be some hard lines, especially in a picture that has shadows and lights right next to each other. If you do it right, it's possible. I mean, there's multiple ways to do it. So overall, I feel like this is looking really good. I just need a way to draw some more attention to the bird. So one way we can do that is brighten the image. Bring the feather up. And then what we're going to do is just brighten this part and the face. Not going to do the tail because I don't necessarily want you looking at the tail. I want your attention to go right to the bird's face. So I'll go ahead and bring that brightness up just a little bit. Maybe add just a little bit of contrast. Make it a little sharper. Zoom out. And toggle this on and off. Yeah, I think that adds something for sure. I like that quite a bit. Another thing, generally I would be done with the picture by now, but if you've got like a really good picture and you want to make it as best as possible, you just want to be looking for all these little things. Like this one, I feel like it's just a little bit too contrasty. So we could take down some contrast or bring up the shadows quite a bit because there is a fair amount of contrast in here. It's fairly harsh light. So yeah, if we turn that on, off and on, I think that definitely adds something a little less contrasty. I don't mind contrast. I think that was just a little bit too much. The other thing that I don't like about this picture is this thing right there. So let's just go and see if we can remove it. Typically, I don't do something as drastic as that. It's a little big, I feel like, to remove. But let's just go and see what it does, especially since it goes right in front of that stick. This is going to be a tough thing to remove, but we'll go and try to see what it does. It's not too bad. For some reason, there's a white thing right there. Oh, you know what? That's because of my mask. Yeah, I think that's because of my mask. Not linear. I want this. Let's spread that out some. There we go. That's pretty even. There's still a little bit there. I'll go back here, see. So, I mean, honestly, that did a pretty good job. I don't think I'm going to keep it in there, but you can see just how big of a difference that can make when you remove a distraction. If you kind of zoom in, didn't do a perfect job. Like you can see the outline right there. See where it went up right there. Um, there's actually probably a way to get rid of this if we brush. I don't care if I'm getting over the branch because it's going to be fine after I remove objects. I use this remove objects quite a bit, actually. It's fairly handy for when you're brushing. Move that stick, and it didn't do it all the way. Try again. Or you could just manually with a brush get in there and remove it if that doesn't work. And then what I'm going to do, because there's just a little bit of noise in there, it's probably because of my lens blur, actually. Then we're just going to go down here to sharpness and take out a lot of the sharpness. And if we zoom in, there isn't that much of a line anymore. Let's see what happens actually. Remove this lens blur. Yeah, I'm going to remove the lens blur. That's just going to make all of this easier. And then we shouldn't need this mask anymore. Let's go ahead and or delete it. Yeah, it's fine to delete. So that got rid of the distraction. Actually, there's still a little bit there. So that's why I'd rather fix it in camera than fix it out here. We could keep working on this to make it perfect. See if that does anything. Yeah, I like that. I feel like that did a pretty good job. Got rid of one of the main distractions in this picture that I didn't like. Overall, I really don't think that there's a whole lot we can improve. If we wanted to get really detailed, we could remove this thing right there. I don't usually like to remove this many distractions, just because that's not what the original picture looked like. But sometimes it's helpful, because in this instance, I don't think I could have gotten or positioned the camera in a way to get rid of these distractions, just because it wasn't physically possible. There were so many branches, and this bird was on the other side of the tree. So I was having to shoot through several branches. So I think it was great that I was even able to get this shot. Yeah, overall, I think that's a pretty good picture. So we can go and export that. When I export pictures, typically I like to keep the resolution at 300, and then I export them as a JPEG. If you were to print them, probably do a TIFF because that is a lossless format. And again, I shoot all of these pictures in RAW. So I highly recommend that you shoot in RAW because it's going to preserve all of those details. With a JPEG, you're just going to lose some details. If you're posting this picture on Instagram or something, JPEG is just fine because you don't need all of those details. But if you're printing it or you want to edit this picture again, definitely save it as a TIFF or as a RAW, just because you're going to get more detail that you might want to have later. Anyway, Instagram is going to compress it, so you don't have to worry about your JPEG compressing some of the detail or anything like that. Um, Also, one thing that I like to do after I'm done editing the picture is experiment with different crops. So, like I said earlier, I really liked how the square looked, but what if we did a rectangle. Yeah, let's try vertical actually. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I might bring this in just a little bit. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good there. Go ahead and try landscape. Honestly, that's not too bad either. Maybe I like landscape the best, actually. I think that's pretty good. One thing that I really like about landscape is because this bird isn't looking like up or down or exactly horizontal, but landscape gives us the opportunity to provide more space right here. With the square, it just wasn't possible to have this much space for the bird to be looking at. So I think I actually like landscape the best. Yeah, I like that quite a bit. So that's probably going to be the finished product right there. Of course, I mean, you could play around with cropping forever and just see what looks best. Really, what I want to avoid is having a bunch of dead space here. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. So thanks for joining me today with this live walkthrough. If you really like that, go and hit the like button so I know to make more of these. And if you haven't checked out the Better Birders community, I'll put a link in the video description below. If you want to get better at birding, that is definitely the place for you to go. I've got courses, itineraries for top hotspots, cheat sheets to help you separate similar looking species, all with a focus on beginner birders. So if you're interested in bird photography, one of the best ways to get better pictures is to learn more about birds so that you can predict their movements. Because if you're always reactive to where the bird's going, you're going to miss shots. So knowing more about the birds and knowing what they're going to do next is actually a very helpful photography skill that isn't always talked about. So if you want to get better at pictures and taking pictures of birds, learning more about them is a good way to go. So I'd highly recommend the community for that. Again, the links in the video description below. So thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.